Hello and welcome to 5-Year Club video number 197. We will be reading the first story in Book 3 of the Japanese Family Storehouse, A Dose of What the Doctor Never Orders. Before that though, I wanted to talk a little bit more about Fortune City, the gamified financial tracking app that I mentioned in my last video. I checked it out myself, and what I found is that it actually doesn't seem to have functionality to connect to any of your bank accounts, any of your financial accounts. So security is not so much an issue because the only information it has about your spending is what you actually manually enter as you do the purchases, which for me is a bit tedious, but I did that when I was in the earlier stages of getting my financial act together. So for other people, it might be just what the doctor ordered, and it makes it more appealing because there's no security issue. Also, the ratings on that app are pretty good. They're like 4.5 out of 5 stars or more. So, yeah, I was like, cool, that's like a plus. And I'm going to turn this book around a little bit, and then we can get started reading A Dose of What the Doctor Never Orders. For each of the 404 bodily ailments, celebrated physicians have produced infallible remedies. And remember, this is 333 years ago in feudal Japan, so infallible remedies indeed. But the malady which brings the greatest distress to mankind, to even the wisest and cleverest of us, is the plague of poverty. Is there a treatment to cure this? A poor man asked a gentleman of great wealth. My dear fellow, the rich man replied, if you have lived till now without knowing such things, you have wasted precious years. In matters of health, the best time to take preventative measures is before you reach the wrong side of 40. And you have left this consultation until rather late. This is very interesting. In matters of health, the best time to take preventative measures is before you reach the wrong side of 40. So even 333 years ago, 40 was this magic number, at least in terms of health. And you have left this consultation until rather late. However, I observe certain factors which may yet pull you through. Your custom of wearing deerskin socks, for example, and bamboo clogs with thick leather soles. If that indicates your approach to life, we may even make a moderately rich man out of you. I have, it so happens, an excellent nostrum called the Millionaire Pill, and I shall give you the prescription. Alright, so let's look at this prescription. Early rising, 5 parts. The family trade, 20 parts. Working after hours, 8 parts. Economy, 10 parts. Sound health, 7 parts. Alright, so let's go through. So early rising, which I would say is kind of like, at least for me, it's using the best part of your brain for the stuff that you want to be intentional about doing your best job on. The family trade, this is becoming less relevant over time, but I can understand how in feudal Japan it would count for so much, especially in a caste system. Working after hours, this is also important, that you combine your life outside of work with some kind of wealth building endeavor, whatever that may be. Economy, so not spending all your money, 10 parts. And sound health, 7 parts. That's right, you cannot have a good financial life if you are unhealthy. Cool. Grind the ingredients thoroughly. Use common sense to get the proportions correct. Mix carefully. Swallow and inwardly digest twice daily. And there is no reason why you should not become a millionaire. However, during treatment it is imperative to abstain from certain noxious things. Number 1, expensive foods, expensive women, silken suits for day-to-day wear. Number 2, private palanquins for wives. I guess this is kind of like Uber Premium at this point, right? Private lessons in music or poem cards for eligible daughters. A professor of percussion for the sons of the house. Kickball, miniature archery, perfume appreciation, and poetry gatherings. I don't think poetry gatherings are all that bad, but alright. A craze for the tea ceremony, and for remodeling the best rooms on tea principles. Flower viewing, boat excursions, baths in the middle of the day. Okay, I think technology has handled a few of those, at least the bath part. Evenings out with friends, gambling parties, playing Go or backgammon. Classes for townsmen in sword drawing and dueling. I wonder if playing Go or backgammon, if there was always a gambling element there. I don't know. Temple going, and preoccupation with the next world, getting involved in others' troubles, and standing surety. So standing surety would be standing behind somebody else's loan. Lawsuits over reclaimed land and meddling in new mining projects. Sake with supper, excessive pipe smoking, unnecessary journeys to Kyoto. Backing sumo contests for charity and giving too generously to temple funds. Carving knickknacks during business hours and collecting fancy sword accessories. Familiarity with kabuki actors and with brothel quarters. Borrowing money at a monthly rate of more than 8 in the 1,000 manmei. I guess that's like a payday loan. All right. So 333 years ago, and they're mentioning, these short-term high-interest loans. All these things are more deadly than blister-fly drugs or arsenic. This is the money line of this entire story, I can already tell. All these things are more deadly than blister-fly drugs. Let's repeat that. When we want to refer to something that's deadly, all these things are more deadly than blister-fly drugs or arsenic. I need hardly say, of course, that to taste any one of them is fatal, but the very idea of them must never enter your head. He bent close to his questioner's ear, a little ear full of the promise of poverty, and the man listened enraptured, accepting every word as a drop of pure gold. He resolved to follow the wealthy person's advice and to work unremittingly from morn till night. But this was Edo, unfortunately, where the competition would be stiff in whatever trade he chose. He would do well to select some line of business which was a little out of the ordinary. With this in mind, seeking inspiration, he stood for one whole day from early dawn at the southern end of Nihon Bridge. Truly, this was the place where all the provinces of Japan rubbed shoulders. The bridge was a mountain which moved, and no crowds at the Gion festival in Kyoto nor at Osaka's Tenma Carnival were ever more tightly packed. Day after day he brought new prosperity to Edo, and age after age the power of its lord and the breadth of its highways grew. But even this great road of Toricho, recently widened to 24 yards from side to side, was already too narrow. On the bridge itself, at any moment of the day, he might have counted at least one horseman, one priest, and one halberdier. But no one dropped anything of value, and screw his eyes though he might, he could not detect a single zenny. Reflecting on this, he came to appreciate the true value of the coin. It was not a thing to be lightly spent. And here is our picture, Jinbai at the bridge. And yeah, he's checking out what's going on. Let's see. So he was standing on the bridge for inspiration for an entire day to see what people were doing. The only way is to try my luck at a trade, he told himself. But if you start with empty hands these days, unless you're a wrestling instructor or a midwife, there is no hope of making money. I've never heard of a koban, nor even as any sprouting from seedless soil. Can there be no way of making something out of nothing, I wonder? He was still looking about him and racking his brains when, back from the day's work at the various daimyo mansions, walking in their separate groups, now 200, now 300 strong, came a procession of carpenters and roof thatchers, cheering loudly and discordantly, sidelocks falling over ears, heads comically disheveled, kimonos dirty at the collar, waistbands tied outside their coats, sleeves frayed at the cuff. Some brandished 2-yard measures as walking sticks. Most walked with hands in pockets and shoulders hunched. He needed no signboard to tell him their employment. Behind them they had apprentice boys to carry shavings and wood ends, but if precious scraps of cypress were dropped and wasted, no one bothered. It must indeed be the castle town of castle towns, he thought, where even workmen are as liberal as daimyo. Keeping his eyes about him, and picking up the dropped pieces one by one, he followed along from the Suruga-cho crossroads to Sujikai Bridge in Kanda, and in that distance collected as much as he could safely carry in one load across his shoulders. He sold the pieces just as they were, and made a clear profit of 250 zeni. It irked him to think that he had overlooked till now opportunities which lay at his very feet, and every day thereafter, waiting impatiently for nightfall, he kept a lookout for the homeward bound carpenters, and picked up whatever they left in their wake. His catch was never less than 5 full loads, and one day, when it was too wet to do anything else, he carved the wood scraps into chopsticks and then sold them wholesale to the grocers' stores in Sudacho and Setomono-cho. He became famous along Kamakura Bank as Chopstick Jinbai, and gradually acquired a considerable fortune. Later, when the scraps in which he dealt had grown to trees, he bought a large mansion in Timber Merchant's Block, where he employed more than 30 clerks alone, and he bought up forest land no less extensive than the holdings of Kawamura, Kashiwagi, or Fushimaya. Next, his ambition boundless as the ocean, his fortune's sails set square to the winds of trade. He stocked his timber yard with tall ships' masts, and sold them all at prices merchants dreamed about. In a mere 40 years, he made 100,000 ryo. All this was the result of taking millionaire pills in his younger days. Now that he was well past his 70th year, he judged the little relaxation of the treatment would do him no harm, and for the first time in his life he changed into a complete outfit of Haida homespun silk, and even cultivated a taste for the marine delicacies of Shiba. On his way back from regular morning worship at the Nishi-Hangaji temple in Juki, he dropped in at theaters in Kobikicho, and in the evenings he played Go at home with groups of friends. While snow fell outside, he held social gatherings to mark the opening of winter's first tea jars, and as soon as the early daffodils were in bloom, he set out tasteful flower arrangements in the impressionist manner. Exactly when he had learnt all these refinements is not clear, but money makes everything possible. There are people who draw no distinction between the beginning and the end, and who remain close-fisted all their lives. But Genbai, who knew that even if he saved Fujiyama of silver, his body was nevertheless destined to be smoke above Hashiba. This is the whole, don't want to be the richest man in the graveyard type thing. And dust on Musashi Plain, so he's just going to be smoke and dust, had wisely set aside a portion of for his declining days, and with this he thoroughly enjoyed himself. When he reached 88, all who knew of his good fortune begged him to cut them lucky bamboo rice levels, and to choose names for their newborn children. At last, weary of the ways of men, craving no further earthly honors, he died as a saint might die, in a spiritual state conducive to the immediate attainment of nirvana, and people felt all the more admiration and envy at the thought that he might fare no worse in the next world than in this. The golden rule for men is to save in youth and spend in old age. It is impossible to take your money to heaven, and it is essential to have it on earth. Alright, so principle from 333 years ago. Pretty straightforward, I think. Thank you for joining me, and have a fabulous evening.